This video contains elements that are not suitable for children under the age of 14. Viewer discretion is advised.
One day, Thomas was running late. He had stopped at the signal before the bridge to talk to some new children. Percy the green engine was waiting too.
Hurry up, Thomas,
Called Percy when the signal dropped.
If you're late, Zack will stop doing Sodorama altogether.
He would never do that,
Thought Thomas. But he was worried.
You don't have to worry too much there, Thomas, because we are indeed continuing with episode 3 of Sodorama, right into the 1990s. The 1990s were a pretty quiet decade in the real world, at least compared to the 3 decades prior, between the collapse of the Berlin Wall and the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Save for perhaps the odd military conflict like the Gulf War, not a lot really happened in this decade. Media, on the other hand, had a lot going for it. The Simpsons, Ren and Stimpy, Rugrats, Wayne's World, Bill and Ted, Beavis and Butthead, Animaniacs, Batman the Animated Series, the Disney Renaissance, Mr. Bean, Seinfeld, and of course, Thomas the Tank Engine. In 1989, the franchise was finally brought to America on PBS via Shining Time Station, which would be the first time that Thomas shared a network with the likes of Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street. In the show, Ringo Starr reprised his role as storyteller for the series, as well as landing the role of Mr. Conductor, a friendly 18-inch tall man with magic powers. As mentioned with Series 1, a few bits of dialogue were redubbed to suit American audiences, but they didn't flow as well as Ringo's UK narrations or George Carlin's narrations. It would have made better sense, as I said, to re-narrate the episodes from the ground up. Ringo would soon depart the role of Mr. Conductor in 1990, following the TV special "'Tis a Gift" to resume his music career with the All-Star Band and his 1992 album "Time Takes Time," and the role was taken over by George Carlin for the remainder of the show's run, right after the spin-off Mr. Conductor's Thomas Tales and the hour-long family specials. Not long after the show's end, seasons 2 and 3 would continue to run syndicated airings on Fox Family in 1998 and 99, and Nick Jr. during the summer of 2000. The latter airing was throughout a certain movie about a certain railroad that had received a polarizing reputation over the years. As for Shine Time itself, the show was positively received, but I don't know if it holds up, to be honest. I know I must have seen the show on PBS, but I don't remember much of it, only that the Thomas stories were used as a sort of framing device to provide lessons to the kids. All I can say right now is that, with retrospect, I think Shine Time Station is partly responsible for causing the eventual demise of the Thomas franchise. Not the direct cause, mind you, just a small part of the bigger picture. With Ringo's departure, a new narrator had to be found for both the United States and the United Kingdom. For the former, it was George Carlin, as I mentioned previously, well known for his stand-up comedy routines. Yep, that George Carlin.
Rat shit, bat shit, dirty old twat. 69 assholes tied in a knot. Hooray! Lizard shit, fuck!
How someone with one of the dirtiest ever mouths ended up on a children's show like Thomas the Tank Engine remains a mystery to the ages, but with that being said, he showed a different side to him that not many would see beyond his comedy routines. He even spoke very fondly of the franchise and even helped further his career until his death in 2008. He even referenced his time as Mr. Conductor in his 1999 special, You Are All Diseased.
And I know what you're thinking. You say, Jesus, he's not going to attack children, is he? Yes, he is. He's going to attack children. And remember, this is Mr. Conductor talking. I know what I'm talking about.
And as for who they brought in for the British dub, well, let me take a page from Gondorf's book by introducing you to him.
His name's Nigel. Dr. Nigel Botterill. I'll get you the details.
Personally, I grew up in the United States, so obviously I have a lot of nostalgic fondness for George Carlin. I didn't hear of Michael Angelis until getting New Friends for Thomas on VHS when I was 9, and the narration I heard from him, I enjoyed. Thanks to YouTube, we can now enjoy Angelis' narration for as much as we like. If I had grown up in the United Kingdom, Angelis would probably have been number 1 for me, and he's probably the most undervalued narrator the show's ever had. The fact that he was following up on someone who was part of the biggest band in the world meant that he had big shoes to fill. It's a shame that Michael Angelis died earlier this year. I guess you never know what you really had until you lost it. Now, what can I say about the episodes themselves? Well, for the first time, a series is not 100% based on oddly written material. No, they adapted some magazine stories by Marvel Comics originally written by future head writer Andrew Brenner. One of the reasons that Britt Allcroft and David Benton resorted to adapting magazine stories and writing a couple of original stories, these being All at Sea and Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure, was because many of the stories yet to be adapted featured a large quantity of new characters, which would have been expensive to produce. Not to mention they wanted more stories about Thomas and other previously previously established characters. The adaptations from the Railway series were generally pretty faithful to the original stories, with liberties taken here and there, though probably the worst and most pointless adaptation of Series 3 was The Trouble with Mud. Seriously, what was up with that?
Mind my eyes, he grumbled.
That being said, Audrey was pretty unhappy with how loosely adapted his stories were, and was even critical toward the original episodes for their apparent lack of realism, the most infamous example being Henry's Forest, particularly this bit.
We've made good time today. We'll stop for a while by the forest.
What responsible driver would stop as if he was in a roadside lay-by? You can't do it. They've shown a lamentable ignorance of Rule 55.
I'm sorry, but that's a load of rubbish. Episodes like Woolly Bear have broken Rule 55, and Audrey never got upset over that. And some of you are probably wondering, what the hell is Rule 55?
Rule 55 is a protection of trains when they come to a stand, reminding of the signalman of the position of your train, sending your fireman within a minute, 2 minutes to the signal box to sign the book and ensure that the signalman is aware of your position on the track. That's Rule 55.
I think he was only really critical towards Henry Forrest because he personally disliked the Green Engine himself, not to mention being based on a story that neither he nor Christopher wrote. Oh, and as for engines being interested in scenery, care to explain why Thomas Goes Fishing exists, in which Thomas had an interest in going fishing? Answers on a postcard, please. That being said, if there was anything Series 3 provided, the show does not need to solely depend on Audrey-written material to be good. I mean, most of Christopher's books aren't really that interesting compared to what his father wrote. Not meant to be a knock on him, of course, and I don't know if any children from the 1990s would have been interested in something like Pop Special or Foaming at the Funnel. This impact would be felt in Series 5, which we'll get to soon enough, and from that point onward, they stuck with original content save for The Adventure Begins and 3 episodes in Series 20. For the most part, the episodes are pretty solid overall, with a nice range of characters like Diesel making his return as a recurring antagonist, as well as the introduction of Dolliver, Toad, Mavis, and Bulgy. Out of him, I probably like Oliver the most because of how fascinating his backstory is. He tried running away from Scrap just to survive, and he and Toad managed to find sanctuary on Sodor thanks to Douglas. Oliver then gained an ego when the big engines gave him respect for his bravery, but he was soon humbled following an incident with a turntable, and later got back at the trucks by pulling their leader Scruffy apart, even though that happened in the next series, but still, just a shame that despite being in CGI, Oliver rarely made any appearances, but at least it's still more than what he ever got in Christopher's books. The other newbies for Series 3 are still great characters as well, with Mavis going for a really good character arc by starting off as a bit of a rebellious, hot-headed teenage girl to a more mature, motherly figure from Series 6 onwards, and it's still carried over into CGI. In fact, Mavis is probably one of the few characters that no one's managed to screw up, which is amazing. Toad and Bulgy I didn't think much of until they were brought back in CGI, and now they're among the best characters for rolling stock and off-rail characters respectively, the latter especially, if Free the Roads is anything to go by. Oh, and for the record, I'm not counting Flying Scotsman since he was more of a prop rather than a character back then, same with City of Truro. There is a pretty big production gap between Series 2 and 3 by about 5 years, most likely due to Britt Allcroft and Rick Siggelkow working on Shining Station, and David Mitton and Robert D. Cardona on Tugs, the latter of which was also being produced by Clearwater Features before it closed down. Cardona left before the third series began and eventually worked on another tugboat-based show, Theodore Tugboat, which was narrated by the late Denny Doherty, who was part of another band in the 60s, the Mamas and the Papas. Doesn't that sound familiar? Although Series 3 officially aired on British television in 1992, it had technically been released first on VHS in the United Kingdom and on Shining Station in America, both in November 1991, with the final 10 episodes eventually coming out the following year, and another year for Shining Station. When the first 16 episodes were released in the United Kingdom on the Time for Trouble and Trust Thomas VHS tapes, they each had different narrations provided by Michael Angelis before he re-recorded them to fit with the final 10 episodes. Another way you can tell that the production had been spread over a couple of years is how Thomas looked. Up to Trust Thomas, he had lining on the rear of his bunker, but from All at Sea onward up to Series 18, the lining was gone before being reinstated in The Adventure Begins. I don't know why it was removed, but it was probably due to Thomas's model being damaged at some point and needing repairs. Another curiosity is Tidbit Shed suddenly gaining 3 extra berths in Oliver Owns Up, Percy James and the Fruitful Day, and Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure, yet in Henry's Forest there were 6 normal berths, and that also applies to exterior shots as seen in Escape and Buzz Buzz. Is Tidbit Sheds really a TARDIS for locomotives? The last idea I'd like to bring up is the fact that Thomas and Percy's Christmas Adventure had been re-edited, rather poorly, into a Thanksgiving-themed story and replaced Christmas in the title with Mountain. I say it was poorly edited because, well, I think I better show you.
Well done, Percy! Well done, Thomas! Cheered the villagers. Percy, I've just remembered. Your mail train is still back at the siding, isn't it? Percy hurried back to fetch it.
From the 3-minute mark onward, as seen in the American VHS Percy's Ghostly Trick, the sound effects and music are horribly out of sync, and it becomes even more jarring on releases like Thomas's Christmas Wonderland, where the original footage is presented, but the narration doesn't match the visuals.
Well done, Percy! Well done, Thomas! Cheered the villagers. Percy, I've just remembered. Your mail train is still back at the siding, isn't it? Percy hurried back to fetch it.
Let's remind ourselves how it went in the UK dub, shall we?
Well done, Percy. Well done, Thomas, cheered the villagers. You're the best Santa Claus this village has ever had. What's a Santa Claus? Asked Percy. Santa Claus is someone who drops presents down chimneys at Christmas time. Percy looked at his funnel. I wonder if... No, laughed Thomas. Chimneys, Percy, not funnels. Which reminds me, your post train is still back in the siding, isn't it? Percy hurried back to fetch it.
The reason America ended up losing A Great Christmas Story was because Shining Station had a Thanksgiving-themed episode called Billy's Party. But why the sloppy editing? Couldn't they have saved it for a Christmas episode or another episode about being kind and thankful? Coming from a woman who said the missing coach would confuse children, her plot holes sure do a good job of doing that, but at least she didn't refer to Christmas as the winter holidays, but more on that later. For all the problems I've had with Series 3, it sounds like I've been critical, but I do think it's a really good series overall. Not as amazing as Series 2, but I do prefer it to the first. It's the most colorful series thus far, and it really broke new ground for the show. After coming out in America and Japan, House Tinkin and Friends had become a worldwide phenomenon, although not without consequences such as the show impacting Christopher Audrey's books, and it more or less sowed the seeds for what we would eventually get more than 25 years later. Wait, hold on. I forgot to talk about Thomas in Japan. What the fuck?
Sometimes it's nice to take some time out, but do what you really want to do, just to realize